If you're using unoptimized images on your website, then quite frankly, your page performance is going to suffer and any core web vital reports you perform is going to suck. Now, there's obviously a bunch of different tools that you can use to optimize images. However, one of the easiest, quickest, and simple tools to use is an image CDN. So what we're going to do in this video is look at how you can implement an image CDN. We're going to look at some of the different providers and see how you can start using one today to increase your performance easily. Rightio, so when it comes to image optimization, the three big challenges you're going to bump into time and time again are images whose dimension are bigger than you need to use. The second one are images who've got a higher resolution or quality than you need to render. And the final one are images that are stored in non-web format. So in essence, we've got a JPEG or a PNG rather than something like a WebP. Now, in order to spot troublesome images on your site, you can run a core web vital check. And from the web vital report, the section on largest contentful paint is probably going to be the one most impacted by unoptimized images. Now, when you start analyzing your performance reports, you'll probably find that the images used in your hero banners and carousels are going to be flagged as your worst performing images. And this obviously makes sense because they're big and they're also updated frequently. Now, before you can actually decide which image CDN that you want to use, you're going to need to understand how you want to use it. Now, there's a few different ways that you can integrate with an image CDN. At a very basic level, you might just want to swap all of your image tags to go via the CDN route instead, so everything gets optimized. Now, you can also work at an app level. And if you're using something like a React app, you might want to create a loader that automatically calls the image CDN when your application builds. Alternatively, if you're hosting your website using Next.js and Vercel, you might get automatic image optimization in the background for free. So really understanding what your use case is key here. So with that all said, when it comes to picking an image CDN service, there are a few different providers in the marketplace that you can use today. Now, if you do some due diligence and you do some research on the best image CDN, you're probably going to bump into these names fairly frequently. So first in the list, we have Cloudflare. After that, we've got Cloudinary. After that, we've got Imagix. We've also got ImageKit.io. Then we've got the Fastly.com CDN. We can also make use of Amazon CloudFront. And the final service that I want to throw in the mix here is Netlify. Now, if I'm honest, this was actually the inspiration for this video because in November 2023, Netlify announced that it's adding an image CDN and it's out in beta to its service offering. So while I was actually reading the announcement blog post made by Netlify about this CDN service, I actually learned something that I think is pretty interesting and actually probably not that well known. So I'll tell you about that very shortly. However, next, let's quickly look at a quick demo of how you can actually use an image CDN service to optimize your website in production. So for this quick demo, I'm going to show you how to use the Netlify image CDN. And if you want to learn more about it, you can go over to the Netlify docs, scroll down, and you can see all the different transforms that you can use. So to use the CDN, you basically need to call the CDN URL, and then you can pass in these different parameters. So the first thing you need to pass in is the URL of the image that you want to transform. After this, you can then pass in a W or H parameter to set the size. We can then use a fit, a position. If you want to, we can also reformat an image on the fly by passing this FM parameter. And then finally, we can actually set the quality by putting this Q parameter. So let's see this working in action. So this is my website, and you can see here that I'm hosting an image in a public folder called Images Sidebar. Now, if I wanted to optimize this image, instead of referencing it directly within my app, instead I need to route it via the CDN URL. So you can see here that I'm still calling the same domain, except for this time I'm putting this .netlify/images in. And you can see here that I'm now passing in the URL. So again, this is Images Sidebar, and this maps to Images Sidebar here. Then I can change the size by adding in a width and a height. I can also then change the format of the image on the fly. So you can see here that it should be a PNG. However, using this FN, I'm turning it into a WebP. Now, obviously, manually being able to set the file type that you want to use for your image is kind of handy. However, it doesn't really address a big problem in production. Now, that issue is browser support. So when it comes to modern images, we've got WebP, we've got AVIF, we've got JPEG XL, and different browsers support different images. Now, in order for your images to work as optimally as possible, you want to use the best file type possible for each browser. Now, as you can see from this Can I Use website, we've got the WebP support here, and you can see a number of browsers don't support WebP. If I go to AVIF, you can see again, there's a bunch of browsers that don't support it, and again for JPEG XL. Now, this is the reason why any good image CDN should automatically be able to deliver the best format for your images. So you can see Netlify does this, as well as some of the other vendors in this list. So just want to point out again that this should also be a key consideration when you're picking your image CDN. Now, that obviously covered how to use the Netlify image CDN. However, if I'm honest, most of the CDN services work very similar. So we've jumped over to the Cloudinary documentation, and you can see here that they work in a very similar manner, where you're calling the Cloudinary CDN, you can pass in a width and a height, you can also define the source that you want to convert as well. Now, obviously each of the CDN services are going to differ slightly, however, for the main part, this is how you'd implement an image CDN within your own website. Now, that covered obviously how to implement an image CDN at a rudimentary level for everyone. Now, did you actually know though that if you're hosting a Next.js website in Vercel or maybe Netlify, then it's very likely that you'll be impacted by an image CDN without even realizing it. So this is kind of fairly interesting. So we're going to cover it now, just so you got some awareness of how using a loader or how using an image CDN in the background can actually impact your app's performance without you knowing about it. I've now quickly jumped us over to the Vercel Next.js documentation. And basically, if you're using Next.js to power your website, it's probably highly likely that you're going to make use of the Next.js image component. Now, when it comes to implementing this image component, you'll be importing image from this next/image. And then when it comes to defining that image, you can pass in props like a width, a height, an alt tag. There's things like defining sizes, the quality of the image, the priority it loads, and a bunch of other good stuff. Now, when it comes to image optimization, there's obviously two elements. So we've got this image component that's got a bunch of props. However, in the back end, we'll also need the images to be optimized somehow. And when you're hosting your Next.js site within Vercel, it's basically going to use its image optimization service, as you can see here, to integrate those props to make sure everything gets rendered correctly. Now, before Netlify released this image optimization service, working with this image component in Netlify wasn't ideal. And I'll quickly walk you through a support ticket to show you the areas that it struggled with. So jumping over to this support case here, you can see Next.js images is really slow on Netlify. And basically this guy's basically complaining that Netlify images are much slower compared to Vercel. So if we carry on scrolling down, we'll see an answer here from the support engineer that explains the reason why. Now, before getting onto this, it's probably worth mentioning around the next runtime. So if you're basically using Netlify and Next.js, there's this thing called the next runtime. And if we look at the documentation here, you can see that as part of this service that gets run when your app boots up, there's a bunch of optimizations that occur with the next image component. So one of the reasons why that the runtime and the images are slow is because on Netlify, they make all the image optimization requests to an AWS Lambda, the next image component. The problem is that the function lives within the US East Coast servers. So this basically means that if you're in the UK like me, and then you want to do some of the image optimization, you're going to be calling the US, and then it's going to be making a round robin back. And obviously this is much slower than the function actually living in the edge or the CDN. Now, the second issue is that we're also using an AWS Lambda. This means that when we're trying to do image optimization, we're making two hops, one to the Lambda, and then we're making another hop to get the optimized image before it can be returned. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to be using Next.js who's watching this, but there is an important takeaway. And that is that if you're using a framework or basically anything which offers you to do image optimization behind the scenes, then actually the hosting provider you use can actually have a big determining factor on how fast your site performs. The next time you're picking your hosting provider, keep this in mind, because how images are optimized will actually play a big factor into your overall site performance. Now that you have a great understanding about why you should use an image CDN, the bigger question is which provider should you use? Now, to keep this video short, I'm not going to go over everything. Instead, I'm just going to tell you the 3 services that I'd personally use on my projects. Now, each service is really good for a different use case, so there should be something here for everyone. So my first recommendation is simple, it's Cloudinary. Now, I say pick Cloudinary if you're looking for some sort of online digital asset manager, media library, whatever you want to call it. Now, Cloudinary is going to allow you to manage images and videos. It's got a bunch of APIs for things like C#, JavaScript that will allow you to upload and download images. Now, just in terms of due diligence, I always like coming to g2.com to see what the review for a service is like. You can see for Cloudinary, 45 reviews, which isn't that many compared to other tools. However, you can see there is a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So the final thing to consider is price. So the good news is that if you're a hobbyist, there's a bunch of free tiers. However, if you want to use this for enterprise, it isn't the cheapest tool in the marketplace. So if we go to programmable media, you can see for the free tier, we can actually transform and optimize videos and images. And you can see that the image and video transform service is here. Now, there's also things for a plus tier, which is $90. There's an advanced tier and an enterprise tier, which basically means expensive. You can also get a digital asset manager. You can see here that you get a free one, so you can upload a bunch of images and manage them here for no extra costs. But again, this can go up to, again, expensive. My next recommendation is the Netlify Image CDN, and I think this is a great service for people who are more focused on individual website image optimization just within Jamstack or JavaScript based projects. So before I tell you why I think this service is the best out of the Jamstack hosting providers, let's quickly talk about price. Now, because the Netlify Image CDN is still in beta, it doesn't actually have official pricing, and Netlify is only going to announce the official pricing when it becomes generally available. However, the key thing to point out is that there is going to be a generous free tier. So I am happy to admit I love a good old free tier, so that gets my tick. The next thing I want to clarify is why I think this is the best service compared to some of Netlify's competitors. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is Vercel. And I'd probably say that in terms of JavaScript Jamstack hosting, the services I'd probably pick are out of these two. Now, you definitely get image optimization with Vercel, and this comes with all their plans, including the hobby tier. Now, the difference with the Vercel image optimization is it's very much focused on Next.js and Nuxt. Now, you do have some options around local images and remote images. However, they don't actually provide you with a CDN. Instead, in the image optimization here, everything's happening behind the scenes. It's all built in. And this is very different compared to the Netlify feature, where you can actually call a URL and specify things yourself. Now, while there's a bunch of different Jamstack providers, I think Cloudflare probably comes up as the third most discussed option. Now, Cloudflare definitely has image optimization, hosting, as well as CDN. And you can see that in terms of its features, we've got images, we've got image resizing, we've got some polish, so we've got some caching. Now, Cloudflare isn't free. You can see that Cloudflare images, while not expensive, starts at $5 per month. You can see there's a starter bundle and a creator bundle, and you've got images, you've got APIs, all that kind of good stuff. Now, just in terms of implementation, this service works very similar to Netlify, where you have a CDN edge point you can call. You can pass in your different options like the width and the height, and you just need to pass in the source as well. So just to wrap up this conversation, let's quickly talk about why I picked Netlify over Cloudflare. Well, as we've seen, the actual image CDN services between the two are pretty similar. However, if we take a step back and we just focus on hosting for a second, Netlify's hosting offering is way stronger compared to Cloudflare pages. Now, if you just want simple image optimization on a website level, as you can see, you can get this from Netlify for free, or you can have to pay $5 to start with Cloudflare. Now, if you have more complicated video and imaging needs, then Cloudinary is a better option in my opinion. It has a free tier, but it also has the advanced SDKs, it's got a DAM, it has more image editing capabilities. And because Cloudflare kind of sits in the middle, while it's not a bad service, the Netlify or Cloudinary offerings are probably going to be better depending on what your use case is. So I guess, as Jeremy Clarkson would say, on that bombshell, we've hit the end. Now let me know in the comments section below if you agreed with my decision, or if in general, if you've enjoyed a video about image optimization. Now for me, I saw that announcement by Netlify, wondered how it would stack up, and here we are. Now before we part ways, if you have got value, don't forget to click on like. I also do a video every single Sunday aimed at making you a better programmer. YouTube is free, so click subscribe, don't miss out. And if you do think I could improve this video, instead of just putting thumbs down, let me know below. Now the final things to say is that there is a related tutorial. It's found in the description, the same as a link to my free Sunday newsletter. So go down there, check all that stuff out. And then finally, if you're more interested in comparing Netlify and Vercel and maybe Cloudflare pages, I've created a video which compares all the services. It'll let you know which one you should pick. So that's on the screen right now. Check that out. Otherwise, until next Sunday's video, happy coding.